Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today we're learning Chassidus, to know God. We're actually lesson 10 in this series. And thank you to everybody here in the live audience. It's such a pleasure to see with this with you. I have to tell you that this text is probably one of the most fundamental texts in Chabad Chassidic philosophy. I mean, obviously Tanya is like the bedrock of Chabad, but this is one of the most fundamental discourses taught in yeshivas and around the world. But the Talmud says, much I've learned from my teachers, more I've learned from my colleagues, but more than anyone I've learned from my students. And I have to tell you that the experience of me writing this book, during the experience of teaching it, is incredibly rewarding. It's like a borehole. And whenever you tell me something, I enter into my notes and I'm typing it all up. So thank you very, very much for your very meaningful feedback in this journey. You know, sometimes just when I feel like why am I doing this? This is so deep. It's too deep. It's over their heads. I'm grateful to someone like Terry from Atlanta, who says to me, Rabbi, you just made my day. This is the most amazing study. And I've never studied Judaism on such a sophisticated level. When David tells me from Tequesta, that this is next level Yiddishkeit. When Mark tells me this is PhD Judaism, I feel, you know what? Okay, now we're talking. You know what I mean? Fantastic. So thank you very, very much for that extremely meaningful feedback. Today, I hope to turn the corner. Because, when you start something, what's this called? The graph that goes like this? Parabola. Thank you, Norman, from your South African mathematics. Parabola, right? As opposed to hyperbola. So the parabola is off to a slow start. It's always off to a slow start. But once you gain traction and momentum, P equals mv, right? Momentum equals mass times velocity. You start picking up, right? It's like an airplane, right? To get off the ground is slow. But once you're up in the air, you're plain sailing. And that's what happens here with Maamar as well. We started off where we started, which was whatever your mindset was. And we're going through this didactic, right? We're going through the didactic, which is that a verb or a noun, or what is that? An adjective? What is that word? It's a noun. It's a noun. We're going through this didactic. All right. I was looking up this morning. I couldn't put my finger on it, but okay. They love the word? Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. A didactic. So this is a didactic. And here what happens is that, just like in the analogy of a scuba diver, when you go down, you can't just go from sea level down to the bottoms of the ocean, right? I can't go because I happen to be claustrophobic. When I went with my friends down to a shipwreck off of the coast of Cape Town, it was fishhook. I couldn't get past like 5 meters or 4 meters, because as soon as the sunlight was out of my immediate view, I was claustrophobic. I'm going straight back up. But my friends, they went down. And you need to equalize. You need to go like this. My son, my 6-year-old, was explaining to me last night. He says, Tati, when the airplane lands and you feel your ears a little bit? He says, that's what's going on. My one ear is like this. My other one ear is like that. So I explained to him about the scuba divers, and I told him, you got to go like this, and you equalize, and you're good. What you're doing when you equalize is that you're equalizing the pressure on your lungs. There's an English comedian by the name of Michael McIntyre, one of my favorites. You ever heard of him? He's hysterical, the guy. He's like, why are the weather people, they announce it, it's going to be sunny, it's going to be rainy, it's going to be this temperature, that temperature, and the pressure is going to be high, the pressure is going to be low. He's like, who in the history of the world ever said, what's the pressure like outside? Like, oh, it's too high pressure, let's get back inside. I mean, whoever says such a thing, who even knows what the pressure is? Who cares? We want to know if it's raining, we want to know if it's hot, if it's cold. That's all we need to know. Yeah, but the pressure. They could be wrong, and they're still, they're still okay. They still come back to work the next day, right? So the thing with scuba diving is that you need, in order to go for the pressure in the lungs on sea level is one pressure, but when you go down at the bottom of the ocean, it's much greater pressure. If you go straight down, you could collapse your lungs, God forbid. That's why you got to go slowly in phases, and that's the reason. Same thing, exactly coming up, exactly the same thing, because you could collapse the lung, God forbid. So that's why we need to go through the didactic with multiple metaphors that literally allow us to acclimate on another level. Instead of just saying, question, answer, have a nice day. We got to build up the question. And then we got to illustrate and elaborate and paint a picture. And once you've painted the picture, now you understand the question. Okay, now we're ready to start talking about the answer, right? I often find that there's this problem with the Rebbe's discourses. See, the Rebbe's discourses are much, much, much shorter than the Rebbe Rashab's, than the fifth Rebbe's. And because they're shorter, they're much more dense. It's a lot like a chapter of Tanya. Tanya also is very nuclear. The second Rebbe was extremely broad in his writings. The first Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, was very, very narrow in his writings. One word, one phrase is like
very concise.
Very concise. And I call it nuclear energy. It's dense, it's packed. One little atom can change the world, right? And the Rebbe's discourse is the same thing. I often find, and I've said this to you before, that when I learn the Rebbe's discourse, I sometimes need to learn it 3, 4, 5, 7 times before I can properly understand the problem, in order to begin studying it again to understand the question, the answer, I mean, right? Anyway, so that's what we're holding on now. We're hopefully going to turn the corner today on finishing to understand the question. Just to quickly refresh your memories, where the verse upon which this entire discourse, the Maamar, is based on is Veyodayta Hayom. It's a verse from the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, which says that, the beginning of Devarim, that you should know today that Havaya and Elohim is the same thing. It's the same thing that we say in Shema Yisrael and pretty much all of Judaism's mission statements. In all places, the same thing. The whole mission statement of Judaism is that Havaya and Elohim is the same thing. You got this, you're good to go, you're golden, right? So what is we actually say it 3 times a day at the end of each morning, afternoon, and evening service. The question is, what does this mean? So we explained like this. So far, we explained that Havaya is the creative energy which creates everything. It's God's infinite power. Elohim is God's disguise, the mask. We call it nature, Mother Nature. When something's repetitive, when something's predictable, we say, oh, that's not God. That's predictable. We say that's nature. What is nature? I don't know, but it's not God. Right? Remember Tanya chapter 1, we come from Klippa. Our natural soul comes from Klippa, which is superficiality, which means because of that, we can't help ourselves. We judge by what we see. We judge by what we see. If we see autopilot, we say, okay, this is not God, it's autopilot. Who put the autopilot in motion? It doesn't matter, it's autopilot. We don't care. It's like the theory of evolution. Think about theory of evolution for a second, right? There's no God. Why? Because of Darwinism. Okay, so let's just discuss this for a second. So humans came from monkeys came from amoebas, right? So where do the amoebas come from? It doesn't matter. You're changing the topic, right? You see what I'm saying? The theory of evolution doesn't in any way contradict the existence of God. Yet, in modern thinking, we say, well, it's either Darwinism or God, and they're mutually exclusive. If you actually think about it, there's no conflict, which is the Professor Gerald Schroeder that we had recently on a Zoom conference here at Chabad, maybe a year ago. He wrote a book called Genesis and the Big Bang. He's like, there's no conflict between the Big Bang theory and the story of Genesis. How do you think God created the world? That was the Big Bang. There's no conflict between the two of them. But if you are shallow and superficial, then you say, well, there's a human coming from a monkey, and therefore there's no God. Because you don't see the roots. You only see what meets the eye. It's superficial. It's a Klippa perception of reality, right? So that is the problem. That's how we see. That's how God is hidden himself from us. Because he wants us to have free choice, right? The reason he hides us is because he wants us to have free choice. How do we have free choice? If God was in your face all the time, you would have no free choice. Right? But if you didn't realize that he's in your face, if you didn't realize that he's everywhere, you'd have free choice. That's what we have. We don't know that God is around us because we're blind, literally, to the presence of God. It's like blind to Wi-Fi. It's around us, but we just don't see it.
Is that at the beginning? Or, like, are there, like you mentioned, Tzaddiks, they saw God in the beams the other day. Are there people that see beyond?
Are there people with X-ray vision?
Not X-ray vision, but kind of get...
I have to tell you, it's today's Hayom Yom. Today's teaching from the Rebbe says that every Jew can and must reach a level where they are no longer anxious from the troubles of this world. How can you possibly reach that level? Gates of trust. Gates of trust is the key to reaching zero anxiety, right? When you reach a state of mind where you know that God is the exclusive power and nothing else has energy over you. We read it in the Torah moments ago. We read about Jacob being afraid, confronting Esau, and then he gets over his fear. He says, listen, God, I'm reminding myself that you're in charge and I've nothing to fear. And he proceeds with courage, right? Remember, John Wayne, right? Courage is not the absence of fear. It's being afraid and saddling up anyways, right? In his words, I think he said being afraid as hell and saddling up anyways. Right? But anyways, so we can reach that state of mind then. We can and we must. If you live in a state of fear or anxiety, which is pretty much the same thing, then you're not in a frame of mind where you're aware of God. You're in a blind frame of mind where you judge by what you see. But if you're able to reach the gates of trust mentality, which is realizing that God is in control all the time, every day, and this needs to be exercised like a muscle, right? That's why the word faith in Hebrew, emuna, E-M-U-N-A, emuna, faith also means exercise.
Well, Rabbi,
Because faith is not a destination, it's a journey which you constantly need to be all the time. What's that, Mark?
that's why I'm coming here in the mornings to get over that fear and try to have that faith in God. I mean, I'm pushing myself in the morning.
That's amazing, and I know how hard you're pushing yourself, which is incredible. I know I've spoken to you about your morning ritual, which is incredible that you're able to push yourself. And bear in mind, when you go out of your way for God, brace for impact because he does the same for you. So be ready. But
I think it also comes back from your history. If you look at how life has you've been affected with life and they overcome things, that's where your belief in God comes from. That he's been looking after.
right. So if you're wise and you're able to not throw out the baby with the bathwater, then you're able to say, I know I've had hard times, but I've survived them all.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you have people that get stuck on the problems.
Yeah.
They say, well, since life wasn't perfect for me, and why did this happen? Why did that happen? Therefore, I can't get past that. So that's a tricky slope that you're going on.
Yeah.
I would say generally as a nation, collectively as our national history, we've suffered a lot. So much persecution. We are an abused child. We're a molested, raped, persecuted, emotional, verbal, sexual, every kind of possible imaginable abuse that a child could have gotten. That's us as a nation. And we're like limping our way into the future.
That's also the point that you can't see God's face. You see him from behind.
Right, that's Norman's point, yeah.
In retrospect. And that was also why did we go down to Egypt? We have to have bad stuff before we can get.
I think, Andy, that God set us up in a negative position. Just like night comes before day in the Jewish calendar, right? A recent theme of mine.
Yeah.
God set us up in darkness before light, in dysfunction, so that we can make it functional. Because if God put us into a perfect world, we would have no purpose. We weren't put into this world to just retire and relax. Adam la'amal yulad, man was born to toil. You're supposed to have problems, and using this discourse as your map, overcome them, and now you're God's partner. Okay?
Which is the essence of Tikkun Olam the right way.
The right way, precisely, exactly. Good. So let's dig deeper here. So basically, God has successfully hidden himself. He's done a fantastic job with a twofold mechanism, right? On the one hand, God is the creator. He creates everything. This is the doctrine of perpetual creation. He creates everything all the time at every moment. If he stopped for a second, the world would cease to be. So on the one hand, God exists. God is the essence of everything. He's the core of this table. But at the same time, we can't see it. Why? Because of a twofold disguise mechanism. First of all, he hid himself behind predictable patterns, right? So the fact that this table we don't see it being recreated all the time. We just see it being, means that I say, okay, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, this table will surely still be here, right? So that makes it predictable and repetitive. So therefore, we say it's on autopilot. And the second element of the mechanism of the disguise is that our animal soul, our natural soul, our primary soul, comes from klipa, which is superficial and judges by the perception of the eye. So when we see something on autopilot, we say, oh, it's not God, it's autopilot, or we call it nature, right? Now that we know that God is hidden, the question is, Havaya is God's creative energy, is the soul, is the light.
Let me give you a tricky one.
You want a question?
Yeah.
Let me just wrap it up. So Havaya is the core, is the light. Elohim is the vessel, is the packaging, is the concealment. They're conflicting. They're fighting against each other, right? So we gave an answer. We said, well, actually, they're not fighting against each other. You know why? The light is revealing, and the vessel is not necessarily concealing. The vessel packages it to make it palatable. The vessel makes it palatable. And we actually went through 3 different examples of that. One example was the bear with me a second. Here it is. One example was the soul, which cannot process wisdom in a useful manner to us. Before we were born, the soul's power of thought was too powerful for us to process. It's of no use to us. If there's a soul here of a deceased relative of mine, right here, I can't connect. It's only when there's a body, when there's a packaging, when there's a vessel, that I can talk to them and have a chat and discuss an idea. But right now, if there's a soul disembodied, if there's a light without a vessel, I can't relate. So the light is too powerful for me to engage. If the light is too powerful for me to engage, then it's totally useless. The fact that there's a body, the fact that there's a brain which serves as a conduit for the light of the soul's wisdom is what allows me to experience the revelation of that soul. So the packaging actually does reveal. A second example was the soul's vision, the soul's power of sight. When the soul is enclosed in the eye sees physical things. Before the soul is enclosed in the eye, what does the soul see? From one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. The soul sees infinite. It's an infinite visual. But that doesn't help me in any meaningful way. The soul, which this is disembodied, is too powerful for us to have any meaningful experience with. It's only when it's enclosed inside the packaging of the eye, the Elohim, right? The vessel allows me to experience the light of the soul. So just like the light of the soul reveals, the packaging also makes it palatable and also makes it something that is meaningful to me, right? And the same thing goes with emotions in the heart. There's the soul's power of feeling, which is too lofty. But when it's enclosed in the heart, then I can experience love or hate or fear and anxiety and courage and hope, right? These are emotions that I can feel, but only when the soul is inside of a vessel. So therefore, we thought that the vessel actually does reveal. The vessel does actually reveal.
Is that the natural soul or the godly soul?
We're not even talking about the godly soul right now. We're just keeping it simple right now. We're just talking about soul vitalizing body. Just the natural soul vitalizing the body.
So this could be anyone.
Any human being, absolutely, 100%.
Natural,
body is a
supernatural, God in nature versus God above nature.
Right? So what are you saying?
So that's basically what we're getting at. That the teva, the stuff that's revealed,
Natural.
it's a duality with God, not a dichotomy. It's not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
But rather two things that.
Right. So in the case of the analogy, there's supernatural and natural. There's Havaya, which is supernatural, and there's Elohim, which is natural. How can we relate to Havaya, to infinity? We have no way of relating to infinity. No way. I have no tool, no antenna that receives infinite waves. I cannot relate to infinity. It's only when God chooses to put himself in a tiny little box called nature, called laws of logic, called laws of math, laws of time and space. In these tiny little boxes, when God puts himself in this little world, that's when I'm able to engage with infinity. So it turns out that Elohim, nature, actually does reveal the supernatural. And therefore, we seem to have answered our question. Because now Havaya reveals, and Elohim also reveals. Yes.
Isn't it true that the only ones who could relate to infinity are the people who are deceased and they're gone and their bodies?
That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. I would say not. You're asking, in case the people on YouTube didn't hear, can the people after this world, can they relate to infinity? Now I'm going to say to this in brief, that when you die, you retain your character and personality. You still are who you were. You're still connected to the people that you loved and your loves and your hates and whoever you were, your character and personality still remains. It's just that it's without a physical body. So you grow in a spiritual plane, right? And every day, in heaven, they get promoted. Every time you say a Kaddish for a loved one, you send them a promotion, right? And depending on how you lived your life is depending on how high you get promoted. But what does it mean that people are getting promoted in heaven? It obviously means that they're not experiencing infinity, because you can't get a promotion within infinity. There's no such thing, right? Promotion only applies within levels of finity. Does that make sense? It's a little deep, this concept.
But we discussed earlier, when someone dies, we just see what's on the surface. When someone dies, their soul is able to see everything.
Yeah, but it's not all or nothing. It's not finity or infinity. There's different levels. We see a physical level of finity. I'm calling it finity because there's no word for this in English. Is finity a word? I don't know. Finite. So in this world, we have a physical relationship of finite things. But when we die, we have a spiritual relationship with God on a finite level. When Mashiach comes, that's when infinity, Havaya, will be revealed. Okay, that's a powerful concept. What?
I get it. It kind of contradicts what you said earlier.
Tell me.
Right? So we're like the lampshade, our body, right? So we have all this infinite.
The body is a lampshade, right? Okay.
Everything. We're just the machine, and through our eyes and our senses and everything, we're limited.
We're filtering the light.
Experience, right?
Right.
So if there's a spiritual know-all consciousness, which it sounds like what she was saying, that when you die
in heaven,
wouldn't you be infinite? I don't see why you wouldn't be until Mashiach comes.
I think you're confusing the analogy with the analog. When we spoke about a soul inside of a body, that was an analogy. The soul was the light, and the body was the vessel, right? Now, when Mark asked this question about the soul outside of the body, then the soul became the recipient, because now the light is God, is Havaya, right? Can an individual soul experience Havaya directly? The answer is not really. You can't. What you need is that it goes through a spiritual filter. Just like you have a physical filter called the body, you have a spiritual filter. It's a different kind of reality that we can't even relate to right now. We can't even relate to this. Let's call it a spiritual filter. And I'll give you an example of a spiritual filter. When I'm talking to you right now, I'm expressing wisdom to you. There's no physical mechanism really going on right now. But I am... Speech is, I guess, an element is physical. But what I'm doing is that I have to take an idea. I mean, can you relate to a raw idea? Look, without getting too abstract right now, I don't want to get too abstract. But my point is that when a soul relates to infinity, to Havaya, it needs a filter of sorts, whether it's a physical filter in this world or a spiritual filter, which is heaven. Heaven is a world, by the way. Heaven is a world. It's, there's 4 worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Without getting off topic, there's 4 worlds. 3 of them are spiritual. The bottom one is physical. The definition of a world is a filter, is a concealment. The word world in Hebrew, olam, also means concealment. So even heaven is also a spiritual limitation. All angels, by the way, there's certain kinds of angels called seraphim. You ever heard of the seraph angels? Seraphim means burnt ones. There's actually a kosher restaurant in Boca just opened up. It's called Burnt. Can you imagine? It's called Burnt. I mean, you can't complain about the food. Like hello, it's on the wall. You know what I mean?
What do you expect?
It's our name, right? So it's right here on the corner of Glades and the Turnpike. It's pretty close. So burnt ones. Why are the angels called burnt ones? Because they want to get close to Havaya, and they get too close and they get burnt. They get burnt. I'm getting too animated. He can't handle the revelation, this guy, So what happens is that they get too close and then they get burnt, so they come out again. And they keep on jumping in and jumping out because it's too much of a revelation. So there's angels that are greater than the souls that also are on their various levels. And in the blessings before the Shema, in our davening, you mentioned various levels of angels, because they are also much, much more conscious of God than we are, but they still are not experiencing infinity. That is the novelty of the Mashiach era. All right?
So Yotzer HaMa'orot, which is the last bracha before the Shema.
The second last.
Okay.
Ahavat Olam is the last one.
Right. But with that one, we're getting our souls, our minds ready for Shema by way of thinking in terms of this thought.
Okay, so let me comment on this because I know Harvey's going to appreciate this about the anatomy of davening. I know you've asked me about this. So let me get into this for a few moments just to explain. So when we approach davening, when we go to daven, you're facing God, but how the heck are you going to face God? I mean, so it's like an earthworm trying to have a conversation with me. How's an earthworm going to have a conversation with me? Like, where does he even start? More difficult for an earthworm to have a conversation with me is for me to have a conversation with God, because the two of us are closer than I am to God. Because both of us at the end of the day are finite, me and the earthworm, right? But me and God are totally different. He's infinite, I'm finite. I mean, where do we even begin, right? So we begin at the beginning where we say, God, Modeani, thank you. I just say thank you. Thank you for restoring my soul. I guess I'm alive. If I'm on this side of the grass, like Mickey says, then it means I'm ahead of the game. Right. And I say, thank you for restoring my soul. And we start with Hodu. Hodu means thank you. Then we're coming from a state of unconsciousness, sleep. We're completely like not conscious of godliness, of any spirituality, Havaya, anywhere. We're sleeping. We wake up. We first always say, thank you. I recognize that I'm talking to a great being. Then we say, this being is pretty great. Because through the Psuke de Zimra, which is the songs of praise, all the way to Baruch Hu, we talk about the wonders of creation. We say, he created the Grand Canyon, he created the oceans and the seahorses and the blue whale, all these wonderful things that we're like, wow, it's awesome, right? And we're like growing our consciousness. We realize that God is the creator of this wonderful world. Are we ready to approach God yet? The answer is no. Because then, after Baruch Hu and Yotzer HaMa'orot, in the first and second blessing before the Shema, now we leave this world and now we start talking to God. We're not talking to God yet. We're talking about God's greatness, and we say, not only is God the creator of this world, not only is he greater than this world, he's even greater than the spiritual world. Why? Because the angels also say, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. What does holy mean? Holy means distant, separate. I'm here, he's there, right? He's far from, he's elevated even from the holiest angels, from the highest angels. We're like, whoa, we're talking about a serious character over here. We're not talking about just some important politician in Washington or some wealthy Bezos character. We're talking about a guy that's way, way, way greater than this universe. We're building our consciousness from a state of slumber, right? Now we're in the blessings before the Shema, right? The first blessing. Now the second blessing is Ahavat Olam Avtanu, is you have loved us in eternal love. What does that mean? We say, even though you are so incredibly, awesomely high, and I'm a puny little nothing, not even a blip in the radar of the galaxy, Milky Way, solar system, nothing, right? Nevertheless, I don't know why, but you chose us to love us with eternal love. For some reason, I am the apple of your eye, the Jewish people, the chosen people. That's the second blessing of before the Shema. And with that introduction, you suddenly filled with a sense of awe, like, OMG, literally, oh my God. Like, he loves me. Wow, he chose me. And now you come into the Shema and you say, Shema Yisrael, Havaya, Elokeinu.
So now we say reciprocal.
Now you can experience love, reciprocal love, Tanya chapter 46. You can respond and say, you know what, I'm starting to feel the love too, right? And after all of that introduction, we're now able to approach God in the silent Amidah. The silent Amidah begins with 3 steps backwards. Why 3 steps backwards? Because we say, listen, we say, God, wherever I am, I know that you're completely out of my league. And you take 3 steps backwards and you're saying, you are unknowable. Wherever achievement of comprehension I've ever reached, I've got to step out of this. 3 steps back. And now you reapproach with humility. You put your feet together like the angels. I don't know if he's liking this class today. I think he wants to ask a question.
We have the break on Tuesday. I'm able to give him his breakfast. I didn't get the break now. So
No worries, a pleasure. Oh, that's what he wants. Gotcha. He's being very well behaved. So point being is that then we stand before God, and now we stand before God with humility. Now we can stand before God in prayer, right? So that's the buildup of the davening, right? So let me just wrap this up with one more analogy, right? So we said like this. So seemingly we've answered our question about why Havai and Elohim is all one, right? But then the Maamar, because they both are revealing, right? Then the Maamar comes in and says, actually, you cannot possibly say that the vessel is revealing. Oh, it's late. You know what? I think I'm going to stop over here because it's really so late. I don't know how time flying over here. We're doing well. Let's just stop over here. We'll carry on next time with the rest of the analogy. I'm sorry, it's all part of the didactic. So I need to, what? Fantastic. It's important to review. Anyways, I'll leave it over here. We'll carry on, God willing, next time, all right? With the rest of the story. Anyways, thank you very much, everybody. It was a pleasure to study with you. Shalom.